Yeah. Hey everyone, and welcome to All That Talk Show, where we strive to educate, empower, and entertain. I am your co-host, Olivia.
I'm Callie.
Can you talk today?
It's like lagging or something. I don't know.
We are super excited today because we are on to share some of the scary stories that has been submitted to us. And so happy Halloween to all of you. Please help us share this video so we can get some more people joining us when we are doing the storytelling. And if you're watching, please let us know where you're watching us from. But again, today is a special episode because it is Halloween. We're not going to do the normal segments that we are. We're going to go straight into storytelling so we can share as many stories as we can with all of you. So I'll hand it over to Callie for her to bring on our guest and do the introduction so we can get started.
Yeah, so today's guest is a storyteller based out of Minnesota. And because it is Halloween, we thought it was appropriate to have some dining for today's show. And so she does her True Scary Stories podcast called MYX In The Dark, and that is for My Gang Shown in the Dark. And the goal of MYX In The Dark is to educate people of the Hmong culture and vice versa, educating the Hmong of different cultures through storytelling. And she started the podcast 2 months ago. And has been able to reach, 21 countries or 12 different countries from all over the world. And so you can catch her podcasts on Spotify. She's on Apple, on YouTube. Her Facebook is MYX In The Dark. And you can send scary stories to myxinthedark@gmail.com. And so without further ado, we're going to bring her on.
Hello, how's it going?
Hello. You look amazing.
Thank you, and you looked scary.
We're so glad to have you here. We are so glad
Yes.
to be a woman scary storyteller. We are both, I'm a total chicken. And so that's why we are doing the show today at 11 a.m. versus nighttime.
Understood.
Last night, 不知道呀. So today we're hoping that since we're doing it early, we can sleep a little bit better. But maybe you can, I did a little intro of you, but is there anything else you want to tell? Otherwise, we are going to give you the stage, girl.
No, not so much. I don't have anything else to add.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on. We'll pass it over to you if you want to start telling one or two of your stories.
Sure. It's so funny because I was watching your show a little yesterday, and the legend was there with you. And so I was kind of watching him and seeing how he storytells online. And I saw that he had like this notebook in front of him. I'm like, oh, okay. So he has notes too, because I have notes.
Yeah.
But like he did not look down at all. And I'm like, okay. So you got this.
Well, he did have a hat on. And I mean, he was a little creepy scene, right? So
yeah.
that helped a little bit with him glancing over on his notes. But every storyteller has like their own way of doing it. And I think you're just gonna do great.
All right. Well, I'm gonna start with this story collaboration, and it's a story collaboration between myself, Lingva, and it's Tales from the Abyss 87. And they are also Hmong storytellers online, and they tell true scary stories. And so I think I would consider us the younger generation of storytellers. And I'm sure there's more, but I just haven't found them yet. But we each took a part in this story and we made it our own. And also shout outs to Ling. I know that his stories are based, or he tells his stories in Hmong. And I asked him to do it in English because a lot of my podcast listeners are not Hmong. And so shout outs to him. Thanks for that. And if you follow us, you've probably already listened to it. And so, but I haven't told anyone this, but this story is personal and it's from my family. I'm only going to tell the first part and also shortened it for time's sake. And so you can always go back into the podcast if you want to listen to it. But here we go. So this story begins with a house, and it was my older sister's house. My whole family calls her Pana. Her husband and her little family, they decided to move to Forest Lake, Minnesota. And the house was huge. It had 6 rooms, 2 bathrooms, a huge yard. They had a playground and pool in the back. And it seems like they had a good few acres of land because the neighbors on all sides were pretty far away. They were a few blocks out. And so Pana's family lived in that house for a couple of months and they made it their own. So Pana had a brother-in-law that lived with them and his name was Va. And Va was younger. He was probably around 27. And so I saw him as a brother. And one weekend, I remember the boys took a fishing trip, a canoeing and fishing trip. And so I went over to Pana's house for the weekend. And I was there to babysit my 2 nephews. And I was there with my older sister and my younger sister. And me being like an 8-year-old, I was more excited about swimming in the pool rather than watching the boys. And so I remember that we weren't allowed to go past the 4 feet mark of that pool because, we're short kids and my sister just wanted to take precautions. And so my sisters and we would take turns watching the kids. They were like young. And I remember my brother-in-laws came back home and it was our last day to swim. And being the rebel of the family, I decided that I was going to try and get as close as I can to that 4 feet mark. And so I did. And as soon as I stepped over that 4 feet mark, I felt something on my left leg, like just move past it. And so I freaked out and I got out of the pool and I'm standing over it trying to like see what it was that moved past my leg. And so my sisters also got scared of that. And so they also came out of the pool. And they were just wondering like what was going on. And that's when my little sister realized that her Hmong bracelet is gone, the kotomba. And we all know that a kotumba is not meant to be taken off, and it's there to protect you. And it was given to her from my mom. And so my older sister decided to go back into the pool to like feel around for that kotumba, and she finds it, takes it like this, like she's digging in there, and she takes it, hands it over to my little sister, and we were just shocked to find that that bracelet has been opened and it's like flat. And so we got scared. We went to talk to Pana about it, and she told us that maybe it was just like chlorine, reaction to the chlorine. And I did look it up, and copper does not react to chlorine. And so just keep that in mind. And so also that night I had a dream that we were swimming in that pool, and someone dragged my leg to the very deep end. And I tried to get my body out, and by the time I got out, my eyes were like pitch black already. And so that really scared me. The next day we, woke up, went home, and I told my parents about it. And so they hupli for my sisters and I. And then a few months passed. I don't think I ever visited that house again because it was creepy to me. But one afternoon, the phone started to ring, and I happened to be the one to pick it up. And my sister Pana was on the other line, and she was hysterical. Like, she was crying. I thought that there was just something going on with her and her husband, and she wanted to talk to my mom. And so they talked. My mom then went over to her house, and that night we found out that Zilova passed away, and he died from drowning in their pool. So apparently what happened was he dived on the deep side, and he hit his head, and he passed out underwater. And, that resulted in him drowning. And so I remember Zilova was a very tall person. He was 6 feet tall. And the furthest that you could go in that pool, I think, was about 8 feet. But the most disturbing part of this tragedy was that my little nephew witnessed his death. I guess he was at the pool at the time, and he just watched it happen. And he was a little kid, and he didn't know what drowning was. And so he just sat there, and he didn't get help. And until this day, he knows that, he sees that differently now. And so he kind of blames himself a little bit. But before the funeral, Pana and her husband called a shaman to look into Zilova's death, just because it was kind of so bizarre for their family. And he found out that, so through that shaman ritual, they found out that he actually missed his time to go by a few months. When Zilova went canoeing with his family a few months back, he was supposed to drown that day. And what happened was the canoe flipped, and he didn't know how to swim. And then his leg got stuck somewhere at the bottom of the river. And so my brother-in-law, so Pana's husband, he knows how to swim, so he goes down and he saves Zilova, basically. And so the creepy part about this, though, is that the shaman communicated with a river demon, and that's why he knows of all of this. So the river demon was the thing that flipped the canoe over, and it was because she saw Zilova and she wanted to marry Zilova. And so she followed Zilova all the way back to, I don't know how, but all the way back to the Forest Lake home, and eventually she dragged him to his death in the pool. And so, I don't know, this just makes me think back of when we were swimming in the pool, and that was the day that they came back home that I felt something move past my leg. And that was also the day where like the, bracelet opened and it was like straight. So that's my first story for you.
So, that concept of like missing your time, right? That makes me, is it Final Destination? That's the movie that is kind of like that, where you miss your time and then it still comes after. Is that like a typical Hmong belief? Because I don't think I've quite heard that before.
I've heard of a few stories, like I can't pinpoint which ones, but then I've heard of it. I don't know if I necessarily believe in it, but I have heard of it.
Yeah.
I mean, so.
Oh yes, that's the same.
I've heard that's the same. People say a lot. So it could be that that's kind of how your life is written to end, to start, and how it's supposed to be. So
Yeah.
there's some truth to it. I mean, I think 有寂寞整给啲你住喺你嘛 right? So
yeah.
我們每日都是嘛，要去報嘢，要認真嘅，要認真嘅 you know?
Right.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell a story about the house that we grew up in North Carolina, and that the house that my parents still live at. And so when we, gosh, it was, and so it was like my Yao, right? So my mom's Yao, and there's 4 of us on our side and 4 of them on their side. So there's lots of kids in that house, tiny house with basement and everything. And so, and of course, we we took the bus in the morning, and so of course, like, we were probably the first. I don't know. I felt like we were like almost the first house, so we're like super early. So I always felt like we woke up at like 5 o'clock, and then like by 6:15, we have to be down at the bus stop, and it was just the next house over. But in that house, it was like a doctor that lived in the house before, and I don't know if the hospital, but it was a small family, like mom, dad, and daughter, older daughter and smaller son. And so that's who we bought the house from, a Mika family. And in the backyard, there is ilu water fountain. Just like a small, like a portable water fountain that people would decorate their yards with. And so on top of this water fountain was a little girl with like beside her, just like a statue, right? And so one day my brother Plur, he had taken out, he had like found a frog, because in our backyard was kind of like foresty. And so, and I have all brothers, and so they're really into nature and all that stuff. And so he had found this frog, and so he needed a place to put this frog. And so then he took the little girl and the dog. And so he took that, because you can basically, like, it's portable, right? So he took the girl and the dog, and he put it on the ground, and then they wanted the frog to shower on the little fountain. And then he didn't think much about it. And then, of course, we get to school the next day. And so then when we're walking down to the bus stop, it's basically dark, and I don't even think we have flashlight. And it's like in North Carolina, where we live, small towns, and it's not like street lights. I think there was like one right at our bus stop. And so we would walk down, and our driveway is not like a short driveway. It's a little bit of a stretch. I used to like run back and forth, like, as my exercise on that driveway. And so it's a little bit of a stretch. And so when we're walking down, I guess little kids laughing. And we didn't hear it. It was just him. And so I think he heard that for a couple mornings. And then he finally told my dad. And my dad was like trying to figure out like what it was, and finally they asked him and realized that like he had taken this, his frog, and put it on this water fountain. And he had taken the girl and the dog, and he had put that down to the floor, ground, right? And so then they put that back up onto the water fountain, and then I think after that he didn't hear it. But there's been a couple of different things. Like one time we were playing in the basement in the back, or sorry, outside in the back, and the driveway is like in the back, so it's kind of odd. And so on the driveway window, like there's glass, and so I had a couple of my friends complain and stuff. And then one time I think I was like facing the glass, and then my friend was looking at like at the garage door, and so she can see my reflection, and she like freaked out. And of course it's all girls, so we're like running to the front. And then when we got all to the front, she was like, oh my gosh, like on your face I saw like blood coming out of your eyes. And it freaked me out, because it was like me, like what the heck, like why couldn't you see that on someone else's face? But yeah, like my parents, I don't know, in the basement. I don't know about other people's Hmong basement, but I feel like our Hmong basement, yeah, my parents don't put a lot of lights on there. There's like ilu thing, and you have to go pull the string, and like it's not finished. And then you walk through the basement, and then there's like this other room where the freezers are, right? And it's never during the day that they're like, oh, go get me the chicken, right? It's like, go mong chong du, and they're like, can you go get the chicken in the freezer? And you're just like, dang it. So yeah, but yeah, I love the house because that's where I grew up, but it's a little bit freaky.
That is scary.
uh,
That is so scary. So I have a story to tell as well. So my mom, we used to live in this 2-story house, and when you go up the stairs, it's kind of like a cul-de-sac shape, right? So it's rounded like this, and there's like different rooms, and there's a bathroom, and then there's her master. And we were in the process of moving out to a new place. So everything has been moved. Chua, a couple of things in the kitchen, and so we were sleeping on the ground. And so my brother still had his video games, and so he was playing video games in his room. I was in my room doing homework, and I hear my mom screaming at the top of her lungs for my older brother, but he did not go to her. She kept calling for him and calling for him. And so it really disturbed me, interrupted me in me doing my work. And so I go and I open her master bedroom, and I was like, Mom, what's going on? You can see her being dragged from where she was sleeping towards the bathroom. I saw that. Of course, it freaked me out because I didn't know what in the world was going on. And so the minute I opened the door, she noticed that I was there. So whatever it was that was moving her, it stopped. And she automatically told me to run downstairs. And when and I don't know, I've been home a lot of superstitious things like that where I don't know what the purpose or meaning of it is. But so I did. I found a small knife and I brought it up to her. Of course, I was super scared. I didn't know what to do with myself. But she didn't want to scare me even more. So she just said, right? So then I go and I knock on my brother's door, and I'm like, why the hell didn't you attend to Mom? She was calling for you. He didn't hear a thing. It's not because his video games were loud, because it wasn't super loud. Like, right? He just didn't hear her at all whatsoever. It was the scariest thing I've ever seen. But my mom has experienced a lot of weird, scary things. And so that's just one of many. But that's like a firsthand experience that I can never unsee or forget because you see some paranormal activity. You see something like Yanu from her where they were sleeping to the bathroom. Like you could see her moving without anything. It was so scary.
Did you ever find out what that is or was?
My mom does not talk about her stuff.
Oh, okay.
But
I understand.
yeah. Well, and I think I think because right? Like there are things where she tells me where she feels like presence, and actually and then like they will like tickle her and like laugh in her ear. She just does random stuff. And my sister-in-law has experienced her scary things like firsthand, seeing like blood all over her. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not her blood. It's insane. But yeah.
That's scary when you see your parents scare y'all, like as a kid. So I'm gonna tell this quick story about a mutual friend of Olivia and I. And so they had their it was just the three of them at this time. So her husband and then their 3-year-old daughter. And so they bought this townhome, a brand new construction, right? So no one's ever lived there. And so, but in this house, and then Nutuzi is in the army too. And so Nutuzi, not always there with them, right? But it's a townhome, brand new construction. So they felt safe. And so, but over time, she would hear stuff. And so one time it was just her and her daughter. They were upstairs and in the bathroom, and she was doing her daughter's hair, and it was a Saturday, and so her husband wasn't supposed to come home until Sunday. And so on this particular afternoon, she was doing her daughter's hair, and then Ninalu garage door open, yeah. And then she was thinking but her husband's not supposed to be home until the next day. And so, because she had her daughter and she didn't want to be scared too. And so she's doing her daughter's hair, and she can hear footsteps walking into the house and then up the stairs and into the hallway. And so she can feel the hair in her, her arms rise up, but then again, and so then she was fine ignoring it until Nathan tied in, Mom, who's that white man? And so she was just like, no, there's nothing there, so they went to but she could feel it, and she said she was so afraid. But she said there's other instances in that house where she at a particular time every single night she could hear people walking downstairs, but because they were a young family, and that was a house that they had bought, and they had no choice but just to kind of stay in that house. And she said that over time, she, talked about it less, and that as she took back the power of, not dwelling on that it did disappear over time. But in the beginning, it was really scary, and so that was all she was focused on. And so I think it made it even worse and worse. And so yeah, it's just, I think it's freaky when you need chai, right, as the adults. And so certainly kind of scary, but.
That is scary.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a story about a suicide. And I know, according to, it is very scary. According to the statistics and comments and, just those data from my podcast, this is this creepiest. It's also my first episode that I put out. And the strange thing about this story is that even when I was recording it, okay, so I could record in the mornings too, right? I do not do it at night. Because I don't know why I tell scary stories. I think I just love it so much, but I'm so scared. So I tell it in the morning. But when I was recording this story, I just felt like it's a little creepy, but it's just that vibe, and I don't know. Hopefully no one's here now. Oh my goodness. But this is why, like you said, we do this in the morning. But yeah, so I record this story, I put it up, and I did not listen to it again because it was so creepy to me. But I did listen to it again just so I could retell it today. And I, like what I did to the other story, I cut out a lot of parts, and some parts you don't be online, publicly. And so I cut out a lot of parts, a lot of the creepier parts that you don't be online. And like I said, you can always, if you're interested in it, you just go find the podcast, and no pressure. Just that one episode is a little creepy. But this story is from a guy who lives in Wisconsin, and he was 7 years old at the time of this incident. He lived in a duplex home with his family. So his immediate family, they lived on the first floor of the house, and his aunt and uncle lived on the second floor of the house. And they also shared a basement that they each had doors accessing. Um, and so the story goes that he got home from a very normal day at school to find that his aunt committed suicide. And apparently, what happened was his aunt and uncle got into some type of argument, and she kind of just up and left. And so he tried to find her. He called parents, friends, and so he just thought that she's mad and and so the disturbing part of all of this was that the aunt committed suicide by hanging herself down in the basement.
Oh.
And the creepier part is that they found her in Hmong clothes. So she hung herself.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. And so, and we all know the significance of Hmong clothes, Toi Yu Amuna. Hmong usually gives, traditional wear for people that they know are passing away. And it's just something for them to like, it's kind of like their best dressed clothes to go in. And so I am going to skip to the weekends though. This is when the strange things started to happen, and it happened at a Jean Mall. And so Jean Mall to and everyone was upstairs in their complex, like on the top floor. And the narrator and his mom were the only ones on their floor. And I believe the mom was trying to find like a snack or some food for him to eat, because he just remembers looking at like oranges in the refrigerator. And from their kitchen, you can see the basement door. And what the elders did was they stuffed towels underneath the door. And it's just probably superstition, Uchisaka, anything evil come out of that door. Not really sure of the meaning of that, but if you do know, let me know. But this part becomes a little strange, because I think he was so young, and I think it traumatized him. And so his memories kind of like it went in and out. And so this is just him piecing stuff together through some of his relatives that were there. And so they're in the kitchen, they're looking in the refrigerator right now. And then all of a sudden he can hear like banging noises from the basement. And so, and then all of a sudden he blacks out, he comes back, and he sees his mom crouching over at the door, so the basement door. And what the mom was doing was like tugging on the towel. And it seemed like something was on the other side, tugging the towel with her, and, doing like a tug of war type of thing. And so, so the mom, Nikilia, screamed aloud. And then the next thing you know, he just remembers, or the narrator remembers, his relatives running down. And at this point, like his mom has already fainted. And so like, grandma Luce. And apparently the relatives also tried to pull the towel, and they also felt like something was on the other side. And then they finally got the door to open and investigated. They try to, find a logical explanation to why it seemed like the towel was being tugged at. And so there was really no explanation that they found. And so they called a shaman to go down to the basement area to see if they could find out something. And the goal of that ritual was to try to communicate with the aunt and just tell her to leave, let the family be. And it took hours and hours and hours. And usually what that means is that something is wrong. Like the aunt is probably not cooperating. And so the shaman comes out and he's like, I can't do anything about it. Sorry. And so they hired a local priest to try to do like an exorcism on the house. And the priest also came out and said he can't do anything more. And so her funeral came shortly after, and he heard from his parents that a lot of things happened at her funeral. Like they saw sightings of her around the funeral home, people who sat next to her, and just unexplained things kept happening, and children weren't even allowed there, so he didn't go to the funeral. And these things just made it really unsafe for the children. And so a few weeks later, the family moves out of the house, and he updates me that he has driven through the neighborhood again, and the house is torn down. A new house is built on top. The neighborhood looks completely different now. And he also updated that he doesn't know why she committed suicide, but he does know that the aunt is still around, like lingering the uncle, and so he sees her sometimes. Yeah, and that's my story. And like I said, I cut out a lot of stuff, just the stuff that you don't be online, and so feel free.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah,
I think it has to do with funeral or people committing suicide. It's all, especially this is all bad, you know.
And Hmong funerals, yeah, Hmong funerals are just what is it, Lunjua? Am I saying that right? Like the drum, like playing, people crying, the fact that we stay up all hours of the night, and I'm grateful
like that's scary to me.
Yeah, just the crying and like yeah, it's just all hours of the night, and oh man.
So I heard that they like a separate drum is used each time. I don't know if that's true or not. If someone could confirm.
Yeah.
Is it like a different? I don't know. Like they burn the drum that they use.
They have
okay.
Yeah, they have to build a new one for every new funeral.
Is that why is that?
I don't know.
I have no idea. You're gonna have to talk to a funeral specialist or something to learn more about why things are the way that they are with the drums and the thing and the different kinds of thing like chua and things like that. So yeah. So this we had a Hmong brother who submitted a story, and I wanted to read it. It's kind of long, but when I read it this morning, Guying Chai Jonah, I was a little scared. Good thing, because this kind of stuff happened back in the old country, that's all everywhere, right? Like they just walk everywhere. So he wanted to be kept anonymous, but the story has a name. It's called A Story from My Father, and it's called Old Girlfriend. And so I'm going to read it as if he was the one telling it, because I think if I were to like paraphrase it and just kind of into my own words, it takes away the scariness of it. So I'm not a storyteller by no means, and so I can't do what you do, but I want to just kind of read what he wrote. It's quite long, so it might take a couple of minutes. All right, so he said, my father was quite a ladies' man back in Laos. Many girls would fall in love with him because he was good looking. My dad was 5'7", so back in Laos, he was considered a very tall man. The OGs would always compliment him on how tall and handsome he was. They would jokingly offer their daughters to him for free. I remember my father telling me about a specific girlfriend he once had. He had many girlfriends, in fact, but this particular one he liked a lot and had even planned on marrying her. Note, at this time, my father was already married to my mom, and they already had a child together. Anyways, my father told me this old girlfriend of his was a very beautiful girl. She was tall, slim, had a nice body, a beautiful personality. He said that she would always smile when talking to him, and the men in the town and the next town over were jealous of that. They assumed she had a thing for my dad, but never knew for sure. Because my dad and her dated secretly for about 1 to 2 months only, my dad and her were deeply in love. My mother, on the other hand, was sad, but back in Laos, there was nothing a woman can really do. My dad told my mom he was going to marry her. My father and grandparents got their plans together for a wedding until they heard that someone from out of the town had already kidnapped his girlfriend to be their wife, which is very common back then in Laos, as we know. My dad was devastated because there was nothing he can do about it. He eventually tried to let it go, but a few nights later, my dad had a weird dream. He dreamt that my mom was cooking up a meal and his old girlfriend was there helping my mom cook. She was smiling at him like usual. She had asked him if he was hungry and how has he been, and that how come my dad haven't come to visit her anymore. Note, she just got married 4 to 5 days ago. My dad replied, I thought you got married already. She just smiled and gently walked towards him. She held his hand and said, no, they took me, but I came back home already. She said, in Hmong, she said, I miss you. And eventually, the chicken crows and my dad woke up. He felt his hand was uncovered and cold. He was alone in bed because my mom already woke up and started cooking. My dad woke up with a strange and depressed feeling, he said. He felt as if something was missing in his life. Later that day, he decided to go out of town to see his ex-girlfriend, which was about 4 to 5 hours walk. My dad left with two of his single buddies, Cow and Tai. They often go talk to girls together, and they are more familiar with the town where my dad's ex-girlfriend is currently living. My dad told me on the way there, Tai told him, the guy who married your girlfriend is one of Cow's cousin. He is short and stout and kind of rich. He used to play soccer with us, but you wouldn't know him because you would definitely have seen him before. Still, my dad didn't know who he was and honestly didn't really care much. When they finally got to the next town, it was almost dark. They quickly showed my dad his ex-girlfriend's house. It was a nice big house at the time, and there was also a lot of people there too. My father and his friends all plan on doing their own business and afterwards meet up at the second house to the left. My dad said that he just walked around hoping to see his ex-girlfriend, but he didn't find her. So he tried to go find his friends instead because it quickly got dark and there were a few cats roaming town, which it kind of gave him the creeps. Eventually, my dad walked by his ex-girlfriend's house again and saw her standing by the tree next to the restroom smiling at him. Note, at this time, people were very shy and embarrassed to see each other, especially if one got kidnapped and married. So my dad looked away and acted as if he didn't even see her. My dad didn't want to talk to her or anything too, because talking to someone else's wife is shameful and can get you in trouble. So he just wanted to see her one last time because he liked her a lot. My dad said he just hurried up the spot where his friends had planned to meet up and waited for about 20 minutes. Then he said he felt as if a sudden cold breeze blowing behind his back. My dad said at the time he didn't think much of it. Eventually, his friends, they all meet up and discuss their business. Cal told them that he is spending the night at this town because one of the relatives' wives passed away yesterday night and they don't have all the people to go forward with the funeral. So he will attend and help out at the funeral and leave after the funeral is done. Ty said he wanted to head home, but my dad convinced Ty to stay one more night. So then Ty decided to stay. They all slept in one of Cow's older cousin's house. My dad, they all slept on a guest bed next to a wall. My dad was the first to fall asleep and he had sleep paralysis and heard little kids running outside saying his name. And also saying that he is in there, he's here, he's in there. Then suddenly my dad saw a giant shadow hand, the size of 5 adult men's hand put together, and it was reaching towards him. After that, my dad woke up. My dad got scared from the dream and woke Cow up and traded spots with him and slept through the night. When they woke up, Cow said last night he heard cats crying and brushing against the walls and jokingly asked, was that the reason why my dad got scared? My dad responded no, and that he will tell Cow and Ty when they get back home, because it's not good to speak of such things aloud while someone just recently passed away. So they left it at that. That morning, they ate and planned to visit the deceased home to show their respect. They followed the OGs to the house, and eventually the funeral was taking place at my dad's ex-girlfriend's house. My dad was pretty nervous of seeing his ex-girlfriend again, but he had a big heart because it was a big chance for him to bump into her unexpectedly, but formally without getting into trouble. When they went inside the house, my dad saw his ex-girlfriend crying at the corner of the house, the family mourning their loss, and some of the OGs yelling and arguing. Soon they were on their way to the deceased woman's on the Nang, the bamboo carriage for the dead. And from about a few feet away, they saw the deceased, and she looked bad. She was dark blue, her face was swollen, blood coming out of her eyes and nose, and the tongue was pressed on her bottom lip, and she looked very angry. So my dad and his friends, trying to be respectful to this deceased family, went next to the corpse. My dad took a good look at the dead woman and found out that the deceased was actually his ex-girlfriend. My dad was scared shitless and looked around for his ex-girlfriend who he had thought he saw earlier crying, but she was nowhere to be found. So my dad told me at this time he was thinking either his eyes was playing tricks on him or she was haunting him. Then he quickly rushed out of the house silently while pulling on Ty's arm and whispered to Ty, "Hey, we need to go back home. I need to talk to you about something when we get back." A few minutes later, Cow came inside looking for my dad and Ty. My dad told Kai that Ty and him are heading home first. Cow then said, "Do you know who the deceased is?" My dad in terror just nodded his head, and Cow quietly whispered to my dad and Ty that he just talked with the parents, and they said she was so upset after they kidnapped her and told the family she hated the family and will haunt them when she's dead because they ruined her life and took her away from the one person she loved. Then she secretly drank poison and killed herself. My dad said at this point he got goosebumps all over his body and felt as if someone was following behind him. Ty quietly told Cal that it might not be a good idea for my dad to be there during the funeral. So Ty and my dad will be heading home first. So my dad and Ty both walked home without looking back. On the way back, my dad said he was feeling tired and heavy. So Ty and my dad decided to try and pick up the pace because they are in a forest and don't want to rest. Because of what they found out, my dad said at the time it felt like a 10 or 15-pound rock being tied to your neck, arms, and legs. Then my dad said he felt dizzy and suddenly tripped and fell, and he couldn't stand back up. So Ty had to help pick him up and motivated him to get back to town. So eventually they reached their town. Ty helped aid my dad to my grandparents' house, and my dad told Ty everything, and Ty was as freaked out as my dad was. My dad soon told my grandpa about these incidents, and my grandpa was a shaman, so he tied a red string for my dad and gave my dad a vined necklace to wear. When my dad came home, my mom asked him where he'd go, and my dad just simply told her that someone had passed away at the next town and he went to go see who it was. And my mom told my dad he needed to be careful because that morning she had a weird dream that a rotten hen was biting and pulling on my dad's pants around the ankle. And my dad just told my mom it was nothing for her to worry about and that it was just a silly dream. A few days later, Cal came back and my dad informed him about everything. Cal let my dad know that my family already buried her, but when they did, she looked very rotten and mad. Cal also told my dad that her widowed husband had a dream of her coming to choke him, which was kind of creepy. A full week has gone past and nothing happened, so my dad decided to take off the vine necklace because it was irritating him. He said it was raining a few times that week and it makes the vine very itchy on his neck. The day after the rain stopped, my parents decided to go farming. My dad and my mom said while they went farming, my oldest sister wouldn't look at my dad or go to him at all. She would just cry and turn towards my mom, like when kids cry and stop breathing for a bit, if you know what I mean. So my mom watched my sister while my dad farmed all day. And while my dad was farming, he said he heard a woman calling his name down the road. My dad got nervous and called my mom's name, thinking it was her. Then the voice stopped. Eventually, my mom put my sister to sleep, then came out to help my dad farm. So my dad asked my mom, did she call him earlier? And she replied, no. My dad said at the moment he knew nothing. He knew something was a bit off. So he calmly told my mom to go in the farmhouse and start cooking because it looks like it might rain again. After my dad quickly finished up the field, he hurried in the farmhouse and told my mom to eat quickly because he was tired and wanted to sleep in early. Soon the rain was hitting hard again. My dad said the night was lightning and thundering hard. So he went outside to gather as many dry wood as he can. Then he heard someone calling him outside. He said to me, quote, "It was pitch black outside, except for the little light in front of me. But each time the lightning flashed, I saw a figure of a tall woman standing at the road towards the forest and field, and it was floating and gliding towards the farmhouse." My dad said he quickly gathered what he had and rushed inside the farmhouse. He then whispered some kukong on the string that held the door and tied it tightly and told my mom to go to sleep right away. That night, my dad had the scariest nightmares. He said he dreamt that he was back at her funeral again, and she was horrible looking. Messy long hair, long clothes, blue face. Her eyes were hollowed and had rotten blood coming out of her mouth. She was laying at her Neeg, the bamboo carriage bed for the dead. He said she turned and looked at him, smiled. Then she got off the Neeg and said she was smiling at my dad, then did a mean face to him and was walking towards him. She then walked about 3 feet from him and said to him, "Guhuhuka o ya gochi te kulio, gochin ya kulelo." Right?
Wow now.
And then said the dad's name. Dokumuma. Right. So, okay. And my dad said she walked closer to him, but she did not touch or harm him. She just was talking to him. My dad was scared, but nicely told her, "You are not my wife. You don't belong with me. You belong to someone else. You are their people and not mine. You are Gochi Samulo." That's what it says. Then she did a mad, ugly face, stuck her tongue out at him, walked up to my dad's face and screamed. And that made my dad jump and he woke up. My dad said it was still pitch dark outside, maybe 1 or 2 a.m. He said it was dead silent. The only thing he heard was light rain and wet footsteps roaming outside the farmhouse. My dad said he was pretty scared from that nightmare and quietly woke up my mom. And when my mom woke up saying, "Who is outside?" my dad told my mom to be quiet. And she said, and she did. My dad told my mom that it might be the bad people, so she needs to be quiet. That night, my dad and my mom heard someone walking outside the farmhouse and quietly exhaling its breath. My dad told my mom to get some sleep, and when she did, he said some more magic words and prayers, and he heard whatever it was let out exhaling. Then my dad said somehow he fell asleep even though he was scared. The next morning, my dad woke up early and lied to my mom and said he needed to use the restroom really bad, but he quickly grabbed a sharp sickle and walked outside the farmhouse. He saw small footprints like a cat all over the farmhouse. He then spit 3 times, then he cursed a few times too. He then entered the farmhouse and told my mom out loud, "Let's go grab some vegetables at the river and we will come back to the farmhouse." But that was a cue for my parents to actually head home. My dad told my grandparents about the incident at the farmhouse, and my mom said she also had a weird dream about someone was banging at the door and asking if anyone was home. And my mom was about to open the door, but then my dad suddenly woke her up from her dream. Then my dad finally told my mom about everything, and my mom said she was scared for weeks and had bad nightmares. My grandpa did a big waneng for my mom, my dad, and my sister, and they changed my dad's name. After those incidents, my dad stopped dating girls for a while. That's according to my mom. Nowadays, when I ask him about this story, like yesterday, to get full details to write this story for you guys to share, he would still get very nervous and he would never mention her name. He just calls her an old girlfriend. I read it before, especially the moan parts. I'm like, ooh.
So freaky, y'all. Like them in like their.
It was so good. I had to share it with you guys. So
yeah, like
it's a long story, and it took me a while to read it because I was like, man, should I read it right now? I mean, you can there, but my husband was sleeping next to me. I'm like, I should read it. It was long. But then I wasn't disappointed because it was so good.
And it's so freaky, y'all. Like Hmong people and their love stories and latte and stuff, y'all. Like I don't know if their love is just deeper, but they want to be together forever, y'all.
Yeah.
And now it's just like she flew and then you got move.
Yes, that's why it's like talk.
Yes, agreed.
Like even like when you're married, it's like and like
please don't come back.
Oh yeah, it was scary.
Right. It's
I
true.
know. But yeah, that was a really good story. We had a lot of people submit stories, but like,
agreed.
man, this one I read this morning, I was like, this is the one we have to share. Like, it was so much detail and it gave you like a whole story. So I didn't have to make stuff up. You know what I mean? So it was fun.
Awesome. Well, we're coming up on the hour. MYX, do you have one last story that you want to share with our group?
Let's see. I have one more. It's a shorter story, and actually, I saw it in the chat, and that's why I thought that I should tell it. It's one of those stories where like you don't. It's just weird, and it might just be a coincidence type of thing. But it's a story about the grandma. So I think I saw someone from the chat mention it, and I thought that I would share it. So it's a true story about my grandma, and it's just based on what I remember when I was a kiddo. So I lived in a house with my grandma, my parents, and 8 other siblings. We have a pretty large family. And at the time, I shared a room with my grandma and little sister. So my little sister and I were in bunk beds, and we slept next to my grandma's bed. And at the time, she had a medical bed. And it was because she fell one summer and she broke her hip bones. And so I slept on the top bunk and my sister slept on the bottom bunk. My dad liked to give us the chore of feeding her. And, you know, me being really young, that to me was always super boring because I don't know, it was just really boring to me. And so one night I was feeding her because it was like dinner time. And so up, right? She looked up because she usually always looks down like on the bed. But this time she looked up and she moved her eyes from like the left side all the way to the right. And so I was like, okay, because I looked up and there ain't nobody there. So nobody was there, and I got a little creeped out, but I kept feeding her, and I was like, okay, that's just part of life. And so I kept feeding her, and then ping like up, and so I was like, right? And she goes, hey, and so I was like, okay. And so I just kept feeding her. I finished, helped her finish her meal, and then I put a movie on for her to watch, and I kind of snuck out of the room because I was really freaked out. And so that night, because I was so spooked, I couldn't really sleep either. And so all of a sudden I heard my grandma adjusting herself in bed, and then she said, Nai, right? And so I was like, you know what? I was ignoring her because I wanted to make it seem like I was asleep, so I wouldn't have to like communicate with her because she freaked me out. And so she just kept saying, Nai, and again, I just ignored her. And then she started saying, right? And she just kept saying that there's a fire and that the airplane is crashing, blah, blah, blah. People are falling. And then it got me when she pointed to the windows and she was like, right? And so I was like, nope, I'm not doing this. And so here I am, like I'm a little kid and I'm just like freaked out at what she's saying. And I just pretend that I'm sleeping. I do not communicate with her at all. And then like daylight came. And the first thing I did was I ran to my parents. And while I was going, she looked at me and she said, you know, and so I ignored her again because at that point I was like, Grandma, I think I'm done with you for a little bit. That was probably really mean, but but I went to my parents and I told them what happened. And so bunk bed upstairs siblings. And then it's so weird. Like this is the part where I'm like, this is kind of strange and unbelievable. Like on that same day, there was a news report saying that an airplane crashed, and it crashed somewhere in New York. And I haven't taken the time to look it up to see if that actually existed. But it was just really weird, and it's something, like I said, just unbelievable. And I have no idea if they connect with each other at all. It's just something, a coincidence to mention. And so, yeah, that's the story. It's really short, but it's kind of creepy. Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like now if I hear anything Hainaya,
Hachilo.
nobody better be saying night in my house, y'all.
Right.
Don't be saying that. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
But I think like when people are about to go, I think they do start seeing things. They start saying some weird stuff because I've experienced that too. I just don't think anything of it. Well, my stuff isn't as scary as yours, but it's just like them just like seeing random stuff. Like they start calling, they start saying people's name who's been dead forever.
Yeah, like they're visiting or something.
Yeah. And so it's just kind of like, okay, but that person's been dead and for who knows how long, and you're saying their name now? Like, what in the heck? So I don't usually like to be around when I know people are about to go, or like there has to be a lot of people there. And who am I kidding? We even need to try like I get grossed out very easily. I cannot be around people who are gonna go. It's just someone trying.
Yeah, this is perfect for today. And I think for our Hmong culture, y'all, I feel like we find a lot of symbolism in everything, y'all.
It's true.
Like the crickets, you're like, oh shit.
Ooh, that means something.
Something's fucking coming or something, right?
It's true.
And so I feel like because of that, everything else is scarier. And y'all, like everything is like a sign or a symbol for something, or something. Thank you so much for coming on today and for sharing your stories. And I've listened to your show, and so I really, again, because you're a woman too, and I love women storytellers. And so thank you so much for coming on with us today. Do you want to just do a quick of where people can find you in your episodes?
Sure. My podcast is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all you do is you just search MYX In The Dark, MYX In The Dark, and I should pop up.
Awesome.
Oh yes, send me stories. I forgot that part. Send me stories. I'm running out.
For those of you who like scary stories, if you have one, send it to her. She will, do you justice in telling it in English so we all understand.
Yes, it is in English, so we get a lot of people listening to it because it's in English.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being with us today. And to Wapelua, it is great because it is during the day, and so we have the rest of the day to let our minds wander. And hopefully, you guys have someone to sleep with tonight. Otherwise, I'm sure someone will be sleeping with you.
You guys can see my face for Halloween.
That is amazing.
It's not on YouTube. I had to follow it, but yeah. My kids are all going to be this for Halloween.
That's so fun.
You need to walk to them and be like, nice.
Don't say that. That's scary.
I'm asking for it. I'm probably going to
be scared of me right now. I don't know how I'm going to hold this all day.
That's so funny.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Again, please share this video. Give us a follow if you haven't already. We really appreciate all your support, and we will see you next time for another episode.
Yes. Bye. Happy Halloween.